I know with Maria Zuniga coming from Guatemala, it's 5 a.m. in her place. And so some of our Latin American friends said they cannot log in because it's too early for them. But still, we are recording this so we can send the recording to those who would still be interested to join. So the People's Health Movement Philippines is warmly welcomes all of you in this webinar that is co-sponsored with a War and Conflict Thematic Circle of the People's Health Movement Global. So the War and Conflict Thematic Circle has been created by the People's Health Movement to address issues that are really of utmost significance in different parts of the world, especially where our members in the People's Health Movement are. And this pertains particularly to issues related to human rights violations and extrajudicial killings, such as what is happening in the Philippines now. So as part of what the People's Health Movement War and Conflict Thematic Circle would like to achieve in terms of disseminating information and understanding the context of what's happening in countries vis-a-vis the global realities, we are happy to present to you this webinar on entitled The Struggle for Social Justice and really working for accountability, as in the case of the Philippines, with former President Rodrigo Duterte being given a warrant of arrest by the International Criminal Court for crimes committed against humanity. So there, we are very happy to have with us one of our staunch supporters of human rights in the Philippines, one of our strong lawyers, Attorney Maria Kristina Conti from the National Union of People's Lawyers and from Karapatan. And we will have 3 reactors also who will be sharing their own experiences based on what Attorney Conti will be presenting. And lastly, we have Dr. Maria Hamlin Zuniga, the coordinator of the War and Conflict Thematic Circle of the People's Health Movement, to give an overall perspective on how we see these issues and concerns and what needs to be done from the perspective of the People's Health Movement. So thank you, Jamie, for starting this webinar. Dr. Jamie Dasmariñas, a medical doctor from the Council for Health and Development, is now the newly designated People's Health Movement Coordinator for the East Asia Pacific region here, meaning countries including Cambodia from the west to Japan to the north, and Australia and New Zealand in the south, including, of course, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and other Southeast Asian countries. And we also have Papua New Guinea. We are happy to have with us also Helen Malik from the PNG, but she said it's too late for them. So we're really in a difficult situation because our time zones are very different. Maria, it's too early. For Helen, it's too late. For our friends from Australia, it's also too late. But we are happy that you're still with us, and we hope to really have a good webinar where we can listen to what is happening vis-a-vis the Philippines case with the former President Duterte and how it will also impact on those other countries where similar cases have been filed with the ICC on cases of crimes against humanity. So without much further ado, I think there is already about 51 of us in the Zoom webinar, and we welcome our delegates, our participants from other countries. I don't see you now. Can I go back to the old? Yeah, can you just, yeah. We have a lot of participants. We are happy. There are a lot of nurses. These are from our Filipino Nurses United. We also have several community-based health program participants participants from the Philippines, from Council for Health and Development, and from our international participants. On my screen, I see Andreas Wolf from Medico International. Welcome, Andreas. I see Dr. Mira Shiva from People's Health Movement and International People's Health Council in India. I also see Marie-Lou Badi from Viva Salud in Belgium. She's one of our reactors. I see, who else? I see, of course, Maria Hamlin Zuniga from the People's Health Movement in Latin America. Wait, let me see. I see Claudio Shuftan from People's Health Movement Vietnam. I think there are Roman Vega from the Global Secretariat. He's the global coordinator of the People's Health Movement. He's based in Colombia. We have Wei Shiuri, also from People's Health Movement Japan. Who else? If I don't acknowledge you, please speak up. I suppose we have staff from the People's Health Movement Global. We have, I think David Verstock is here also.
Hello, Dylan.
Yeah, hi, David. I'm glad you're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I just got in. I just came back. So I'm hearing that probably David is having trouble joining.
Who?
David Verstock? Is he having trouble joining? No.
I'm here. That's
Yeah.
good.
You're
Then-
here. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So who's speaking? Is that David or is that Miguel?
This is Miguel.
Okay, so we have several from the different members of the People's Health Movement, and we are really happy that also there are a lot of people from the Philippines who are also in the webinar, and we really look forward to a very interesting discussion this evening or this morning, wherever you are. So again, without much further ado, let us proceed. So I'd like to call on our main speaker. We have attorney Maria Kristina C. Conti, or Chrissy for short. So Chrissy is a people's lawyer in the Philippines who works largely on criminal defense cases representing political prisoners. She is highly familiar with political persecution, law enforcement, and prison reform, conflict resolution and peace processes, and international humanitarian law. She has experience in high-profile civil rights issues and strategic human rights litigation. She handles cases and is a resource person about former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs. She is currently the Secretary General of the National Union of People's Lawyers chapter in the National Capital Region. She joined NUPL, the Philippines' largest voluntary human rights lawyers group, in 2009 as a law student, and was the founding president of its first law student chapter in the University of the Philippines College of Law. She was in-house counsel of NUPL after passing the bar in 2014 to 2015. She also joined the law firm Public Interest Law Center from 2016 to 2023. She is qualified to practice law in the Philippines and before the International Criminal Court. Among cases she has taken part in are the conviction of Major General Jovita Palparan for the disappearance of 2 university students and the conviction of 4 policemen for the extrajudicial killing of a father and a son in the war on drugs. She has also assisted international media organizations, Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders, file an amicus brief on criminal cyber libel. She's a lecturer on media law at her alma mater, the University of the Philippines College of Mass Communications. She advocates for genuine national democracy and is affiliated with the party list Bayan Muna and alliances, concerned lawyers for civil liberties, and the manananggol laban sa extrajudicial killings. She has a Fisher Family Summer Fellow in July 2024 at Stanford University Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. She was recognized by the UP College of Mass Communications Alumni Association for work beyond the usual consistent track record of excellence, and given the Glory Award for Social Advocacy in 2021. She is the treasurer of the Confederation of Lawyers in Asia and the Pacific. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and a Juris Doctor from the Philippines National University. At the UP College of Law, she worked at the UP Institute of Human Rights and served 1 year as the sole sectoral representative for students, the student regent in the UP system's highest policymaking body, the Board of Regents. As a young activist, she gained extensive experience in student, labor, and community organizing. She previously worked as a reporter for a leading business daily. So without much further ado, friends, let us welcome Attorney Maria Kristina Conti, or Chrissy, to us, her friends.
Thank you, Dr. Delen. I'm so sorry that was, I think, the longer version. But I think what would be more important to share with you today is that I am the lawyer or one of the lawyers for victims in the situation in the Philippines. And we are very excited that we're seeing our years of work ripen now with the opening of the investigation of Rodrigo Duterte. Now, let me just share my screen, and if you would tell me if you see the PowerPoint correctly. Yeah?
Yeah, can you make it bigger, Chrissy?
Oh, bigger, wait, a bit.
And can you make your volume louder?
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Let me redo this. So there should be a smaller screen. And for the sound, sorry, technology. For the sound, there you go.
Good.
Better now?
Thank you. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So I would assume that the screen is now on full mode and that you should see a little bit of me on the bottom. I'm going to talk about the crimes against humanity of Rodrigo Roa Duterte as embodied in the charges against him. But first, of course, I would like to present to you what happened in the Philippines as a refresher. Trigger warning, content warning for those who might be offended or triggered by some of the photos. So trigger warning for blood and gore, I think, and violence. Let me just run through this video. So this is Duterte talking about his first 100 days in office.
I would stop drugs and crime, criminality.
Oops.
In 3 to 6 months.
So this is a montage of videos from the coverage of the news group Rappler in the first 100 days of Duterte. And you can see the killings, their arrests. led by no other than the Philippine National Police under the instruction of the Philippine President. You could imagine that after these first 3 months, the killings would intensify.
But just give me a little extension, maybe of another 6 months.
And after that 6 months, he would go on to, well, essentially order the killings until the end of his term in 2022, June. So this is a short timeline of, or rather a concatenated timeline of everything that has happened. On top would be photos of G. Ik Ju, Kian de los Santos, and Micah Ulpina, who were killed in 2016, 2017, and 2019, respectively. Their cases were among those most popular and most impactful on the war on drugs. After G. Ik Ju, the police reviewed protocols. This was the case of the Korean national who was arrested, taken to Camp Krame, which was the headquarters of the national police, cremated, and his ashes flushed down the toilet. He was allegedly taken in for an extortion attempt, but he was eventually killed. More familiar would be, or most popular would be, the case of Kian de los Santos, the 17-year-old, who was out in the streets one evening in Caloocan, which was one of the hot spots. He was taken, dragged by two police officers to a dark alley where he was apparently, allegedly killed. This was later proven in court. And the police narrative that he had been arrested and that he was resisting was eventually rebutted by more than enough documentary, meaning papers and documents, documentary object, meaning hard evidence, mostly forensic evidence, and testimonial evidence. The killing of Micah Ulpina also in 2019 also signaled a little bit of shift in police operations, because in her case, and actually on the part of the general public, this was kind of the height of rage, because Micah Ulpina was 3 years old when she was killed. And then the chief of police, Bato de la Rosa, was quoted as saying, well, this is collateral damage and shit happens. At the end of Duterte's term, 7,640 were declared officially dead in police operations, and more than 350,000 were arrested in police operations during his entire term in office. I've also noted the DOJ review and the ICC investigation. Well, of course, the ICC preliminary examination, which began in 2018, was sort of complemented by a supposed DOJ review or a similar review in the Philippines. Unfortunately, they were only able to look at 52 cases and purportedly up to 300 other cases of these types of killings. However, the ICC saw that this was not the same case or the same conduct that was being investigated by the International Criminal Court, and therefore it proceeded with an investigation in 2021. The investigation and the preliminary examination, so the preliminary examination talks about what or are there crimes committed within the jurisdiction of the court, and ICC, in the investigation, the ICC looks at, well, who are the most responsible? Because the ICC is a very special court that tries only 4 cases, 4 types of cases, and it only prosecutes the most responsible or those who bear the greatest responsibility. They are not supposed supposed to, well, supplant domestic courts in case of grave human rights violations. They're only the ICC is only intended to prosecute or to try those who are at the top of the chain, so to speak. There have been efforts domestically to look into these cases, into these human rights violations, but unfortunately, not all have been successful. I'm showing to you the brief. This is the Command Memorandum Circular 16-2016, signed on the first day of office of Duterte. And this is the infamous OPLAN, or Project Double Barrel. We will see eventually 4 iterations of this document, and the last one is actually still in place now. OPLAN Double Barrel Finale, or what they call Adore, which essentially talks about a plan to save the user but jail the pusher. Innocuous, but of course, we've noticed that in the body or in the content of the document, there is a term called, they use a term neutralization. And for us, legally, what this could mean is killing. And that is how the police have interpreted this instruction to neutralize illegal drug personalities. And so we've seen killings. I'm going to focus a bit on killings that are more, say, widespread than, or I cannot say widespread because there were maybe 7,000 up to 30,000 dead, but there were a lot more arrested, detained, probably tortured, and some raped. But we'll focus now on extrajudicial killings. So during the war on drugs, quote unquote, and we use it as a kind of a term on its own, war on drugs, because it wasn't really a war, because if you have a war, you have 2 sides who are well equipped to go against each other. This was a massacre, and it was not a war on drugs, but a massacre of the poor. And so for the types of killings, generally there would be 2 types. One by unknown perpetrators, which would be the vigilante killings, and then known perpetrators, obviously by the police. And they could either be in drug-related operations or index crime-related operations. What we noticed was, after the Kian de los Santos case, the police drew a lot of flack. And I mean, they were doing drug operations then. They were saying that Kian de los Santos, a 17-year-old whose last words were, wag po, please don't, may test ako bukas. I have a test tomorrow. Because of the flack the police received, eventually what they did was conduct police operations that were crime-related. And so in the subsequent cases, like that of 19 years, as if Carl Arnaiz was a hold-upper, a robber who boarded a taxi at night and then tried to hold the taxi, that tried to rob the taxi. And so when he alighted, the police said they gave chase, and then when they kept caught up to him, the usual quote-unquote nanlaban operation or nanlaban scenario came up, that Carl Arnaiz had a gun and then shot back at them. So it wouldn't be classified as a drug operation, which has very stringent rules before you can conduct it. Because in a drug operation, I hope kind of everybody has some familiarity. You try to buy drugs, and then the money that you use by the police has to be marked. And then the drugs, as soon as you buy it, quote unquote, meaning, I mean, there has been a transfer of money and goods. There's a signal that, oh, you can do the arrest now. That's very stringent. Now with hold-ups or robberies or whatever, this would be follow-up operations after a crime has been committed. And it would be easier for the police to give pursuit. Usually these are called hot pursuit operations and therefore have very little paperwork behind it. But I'd like to bring you back to the first few months. In the first few days, actually, immediately after Duterte was announced or declared as president-elect, there were bodies along the roadsides with narco messages. And I say these narco messages because they were first used or first seen in Mexico, Sinaloa style killings, so to speak. And these narco messages read, "I am a pusher, do not follow me. Okay, do not copy me." And then another common modus operandi for vigilante killings is from what we call here in the Philippines would be riding in tandem. Let's just have this video, a short video, to kind of remind everybody of how it goes.
CCTV ng Barangay 21, makikitang nakaupo lamang sa labas ang biktima at may mga kausap ng pagbabarilin siya ng riding in tandem. Hinagisan din siya ng karatula na may mga katagang pusher, hold upper, huwag tularan.
So the video says, it's in Filipino, but the video says essentially that this was a riding in tandem operation, and then someone or one of those on the motorcycle threw out a cardboard saying, "This is a pusher, do not copy, do not follow." And so if we look at the killings by unknown perpetrators, by known perpetrators plus unknown perpetrators, you would have a clearer picture of how many were killed. But we'll go back to that a bit later. I just wanted to raise this issue about classification of deaths. So how would the police count these operation or these killings? One, they do it by computing according to the number of homicide cases. Later on, they reclassify the name or the title, saying that, oh, this should be deaths under investigation. They started with deaths under investigation, and then they did murders under investigation. And then they did, let's classify this as homicides. When you say murder, that these people were killed with intent. And then with deaths, it's just like deaths. So there's a little bit of nuance to these terms. But eventually, they decided that, let's use homicides. But then they're trying to actually clean up and limit the number of deaths that they should tally. If you look at this photo, this is about less than a year before or less than a year after Duterte came into power. So there were already 5,824 homicide cases. This would be different, as what the police said, from dead in police operations. So homicide cases under investigation. Now, it's a little bit difficult to compute really how many were killed, but the government put out documents. This is hashtag real numbers, PH, and this is how they release documents from. If you look at the bottom, this is an official government publication, all right? So it looks cheerful, it's cartoony and all, but it gives us grim numbers. As of May 31, 2022, 6,000 dead. Come June 2022, which would be the end of Duterte's term, they would admit to 7,640. The numbers have always been controversial, but first let's go to how systematic were these killings. So first, there would be vilification, and this type of vilification is similar to how they vilified activists. So we are very familiar with this. Duterte, or I would say generally, a despot, a dictator will say, our problem is this: drugs, terrorism, the rebels, the NPA, whatever their medicine, quote unquote, or their poison of choice. So they would declare war on this or that, and try to other a certain group of people whom they would, dehumanize, vilify, and therefore create an enemy for the general public. For the Filipinos in the room, this would be familiar and perhaps traumatic to recall that we were actually asked to supply names of drug addicts. within our communities. What's this? Okay, now you see the presentation. Oh, sorry. I have to hide the meeting controls. So, okay. So one, we had the drop boxes, where anybody could drop in names of people who they thought were involved in drugs. Second, they did census operations where they said, please report how many people live in your house and then how many people are drug addicts. And then please also tell us how many people are drug addicts in your neighborhood. And independently, different offices of the executive made or put out or of the president. And these lists were not vetted or verified. After the vacation, obviously, there would be the operation, which would result in, as I earlier mentioned, nanlaban scenarios where the suspect allegedly was armed and shot first at the operatives. In vigilante killings, they were made Davao Death Squad style. And eerily similar to what was happening in Davao, there would be vigilantes hunting down, quote unquote, the quote unquote again, criminals. And so how they painted drug addicts were that they were the scum of the earth and that they were the petty thieves. They were the ones stealing from people's houses, akyat bahay gangs, and operating essentially in as causing insecurity in all our houses or in all our lives. And then ultimately, after that, of course, there would be absolution or a promise of impunity. Duterte himself has promised pardon for all police officers who would be found. Wait, I'm trying to hide all these meeting materials. All police officers who would be found in violation of protocol. Let's see how I can do this. I think, is that right? The bottom part of this panel is, I don't know how to. There you go. All right. So he promised pardon. And then in most of the cases, or in almost all of the cases, there were no or poor investigation and obviously no prosecution. During the time of Duterte, the entire police and prosecution system was caught up in, let's just proceed to this video, and all caught up in a well, conspiracy as we like to know it, as we came to know it. So this is a Reuters report that features, there's no audio, that features the killing of 2 persons in Tondo, Manila. And this is typically how police operations happen. Earlier, we've seen a vigilante killing, in effect. This one shows us police officers swarming into a rather populated area. And this is how urban poor areas usually are: crowded, full of people, and rather, okay. Okay. And full of all kinds of people. So Danica Campo, the granddaughter of one of the deceased, features in this video, in this shot. She's crying because I do believe that they're thinking, or the police have been shouting or warning the people that, or they know that an operation was and will happen. You see Campo on the ground. And the police almost nonchalantly walking around the crime scene. At this point, I think they're looking for the other suspect whom they are pursuing within this particular area. Now, these other officers, yeah, you just see them casually walking around, are trying to see if there are witnesses. And with the camera put off center at the end, there's an obvious cover-up of this police operation. And so if you add up these drug personalities who died in anti-drug operations and then homicide cases, there is a clear indication that the killings ran up to tens of thousands. And by December 2017, the President's Office releases this accomplishment report, which features these killings as accomplishments, up to 20,000 at that time. Even the PNP would admit that by 2018, 2019, more than 29,000 ended up dead in the drug war. So, and we'll just run through this quickly. So how many really were killed during Duterte's war on drugs? We have government data. So, sorry, that's not 6,252. This should now be 7,640. And this is what the police themselves admitted in the Quadcom hearings, in the legislative hearings that came last year and this year. And then from the PNP spokesperson, 29,000 deaths. That's government data. Now from the academic media. So there have been media and, let's start first with the academic. The drugarchive.ph, which is still up, talks about 7,000 drug-related deaths. This is from news reports from in 2 years. The HAS talks about 5,348 killings, which could be seen from news reports during the entire Duterte presidency. From news reports, ABS-CBN, 7,000. They did a running total until May 20, 2022. And then from the Philippine Daily Inquirer, almost or less than a year, they counted 2,174 drug-related deaths. The kill list, actually, with the Philippine Daily Inquirer, was one of the first ones which featured like the names of the deceased. If we do more research, so there's this ACLED, Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, which also has a website. There's a projection of how many were killed and from where these killings were. So there were a lot in Metro Manila, but also there were some red spots, hot spots, especially in Central Zone, and that's Bulacan. Officially, we can talk about the report of the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights of the United Nations. In her June 2020 report, she talks about 8,663 people. And this is until February 4, 2019. The Commission on Human Rights has an EJK report as of April 2020. It's 3,790 cases that they've opened. And in the ICC, and this is the most controversial, I would say, the decision dated September 2021, which talks about the request to open an investigation, puts an estimate range of 12,000 to 30,000 killed. Now, do the numbers matter? Not really. Let's hear quickly from Duterte. For him, of course, it matters.
For those son of a bitch, ilan? 3,000? I will kill more, if only to get rid of drugs. And this campaign, I thought that I would finish it within 6 months, but my standard then was Davao City. When I became president, I had access to all information. And then I start to squeeze everybody. And then you realize that you saw it on TV by the hundreds of thousands. Ganun pala kalala. And there are
So that's it for horse's mouth.
for
Crime. whether I don't know, in other jurisdictions, it could be homicide or manslaughter or involuntary because have been dismissed or kind of frozen because on freeze, on hold, because there were no further evidence that they could find. There were several cases initiated by victims and some by state agencies, in particular the Public Attorney's Office. But there is a perception on the part of PAO cases that these were kind of sample cases that were backed by the government so that they would be, so that there would be at least 2 cases prosecuted. That would be Kian's case and Carl Arnaiz's case. So after that, the government was mostly silent on the other incidents. There were international investigations ordered by the UN Human Rights Council. However, this was, and even in the International Criminal Court, there was an impact of the announcement of the DOJ review. So Bernardo Guevara goes out one day, October 2020, says that, we'll investigate cases in the Philippines. Both were set aside, suspended temporarily. Fortunately, too, they weren't able to prove that their investigations were actually sufficient to mirror the character or to merit the character of the killings. In the Philippines, if you were to charge each and every one of these cases, the nature would be homicide or murder. So murder being intentional killing. But under the Rome Statute, a document which we acceded to in November 2011, and we unacceded to, meaning we withdrew from in March 2019. Article 7 talks about widespread or systematic attacks directed against a civilian population in acts of murder and other inhumane acts. There would be specific acts, of course, as to inhumane acts, and that would be rape, torture, and so forth. Now, who would be responsible for these crimes? If we're talking about homicide and murder, then the one who pulled the trigger. But if crimes against humanity, which I will just quickly go back, as widespread or systematic attacks, whoever is on top or the mastermind of the widespread and systematic attacks would definitely be a principal. And the one who bears the greatest responsibility for crimes against humanity would obviously be Rodrigo Duterte. And a cabal, a whole slew of people who would be involved in one way or another in the killings. Of course, it's not just him. And so you have policemen, civilian hitmen, and then other key officials. And there's the Davao boys that he imported from Davao and put into civilian and police positions when he became president. There were also Davao boys who were kind of key officials, who were not part of the law enforcement arena, including Bong Go. And then the PDEA, which is the Philippine Drug Enforcement Authority, is the authority that's supposed to take the lead on drugs. And it was actually irregular or unnatural for the PNP to operate. But during the time of Duterte, that's how it happened. He was able to, unilaterally say, okay, we'll have the police do or take the lead on drugs operations. It's because the PDEA hardly resisted. Because they were, he put in his boys. So in the ICC, okay, now we go to the meat of the kind of discussion. In the ICC, this is how it goes. There's a preliminary examination that talks about what is the crime, and then an investigation that talks about who is the perpetrator. In 2020, I mentioned that the Philippine government said, may we ask that the investigation be deferred because we are investigating. Now, this appeal was rejected by the pretrial and appeals chamber, And so in January 2023, it was clear, July 2023, it was clear that, oh yes, we should proceed with the investigation. In the investigation, just to note, we still are at that stage of investigation. And even after even with Duterte's arrest, there could still be others identified. And in several of the documents, or at least one of the documents, the name of Ronald De La Rosa and Oscar Albayalde are identified. These are the police chiefs, the first two police chiefs of Duterte. Actually, the police chiefs within the period that was covered by the ICC investigation. In police, 3 other police officials might be the subject of a warrant. And so why was Duterte arrested, or what is the context of the warrant? So the ICC judges determined that Duterte is an indirect co-perpetrator, meaning he might not have pulled the trigger, but he was part of the operation, in fact, the mastermind of crimes against humanity in the act of murder, which is why I talked about largely murder, because he was arrested because there is strong evidence that he was the mastermind for these murders, okay, and committed in the Philippines from November 2011 to March 2019. The ICC pre-trial chamber, or the judges, rejected allegations of rape and torture. Now, this could be put back into the charges. And I'd like to make this clarification that suspect Duterte at present does not face a particular charge yet, or a particular, he was arrested because of crimes against humanity and the acts of murder, but the scope of the charges could expand and go back and revert to crimes against humanity in the acts of murder, other inhumane acts, including rape and torture, if the office of the prosecutor talks about and pursues these charges. These charges at the confirmation hearing on September 23rd, 2025. The hearings are set on, I think, over a period of protocols or Philippine processes. People are right now a bit confused. What are the charges against Duterte? It's because the judges are going to approve or decide that in September still. But nonetheless, at this point, there will be, or there should be, disclosure of evidence between the defense and the prosecution. On the part of the victims, whom I represent, we have a different role entirely. And this is simply participating in the views and concerns, not present and OP assist. The burden is not really to prove the case, but to raise the interest of the victims before the court. Lesser in intensity, because we're not going to prove the guilt of Duterte, but of course, we are in favor of that. But most importantly, we should tell the court, we should be able to tell the court how the victims view this, and from a legal and a moral point of view, how the prosecution should continue. This is important because the court is, as it calls itself, a victim-friendly court. And despite, and I will end here, despite the many imperfections of the International Criminal Court, we were well aware of the limitations. First, it is a court that has some implications as to or has colonial criticism, because in the beginning there really up until Duterte there really were just African suspects in detention. Although recently the International Criminal Court went after quote unquote white suspects with Netanyahu, Gallant, and Putin and three of his ministers or generals. The ICC really hasn't functioned as people would like it to function. Another limitation is that the ICC, the most powerful nations in the world are not members of the ICC, and that would include China, the US, India even is not a member of the ICC. So there are limitations to this court. However, the victims have chosen this avenue in order to pursue justice. And so to speak, we're not putting all our eggs in this basket, in one basket. And we assure you that as lawyers of the victims, we are pursuing justice in many other opportunities and platforms as well, including, and similarly, international people's tribunals, UN investigations, and so forth. Because for us, if we look at it from the people's point of view, Duterte is guilty already and should be convicted for crimes against humanity and all other crimes against the Filipino people. I end there, and I will anticipate. I'm looking forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Well, thank you to Attorney Chrissy for her presentation. So I hope no one was, especially the Filipinos in the crowd, I hope no one was too triggered. But despite how heavy the discussion has been, it has indeed given us hope that there's a fighting chance, especially for the victims and the families that they've left behind. And regarding your questions and short reactions, we request you to please hold on to them for now. We have 3 reactors. We've invited 2 from the Philippines, 1 representing the relatives of the victims, 1 from PHM-Philippines, and also another comrade from PHM Global, particularly Viva Salud. So first, we would like to call on Shira Escudero. So Shira is the sister of Ephraim, an 18-year-old who disappeared on his way to the cell phone repair shop of his family in September 2017. So he was one of the first victims. And this happened in the province of Laguna in the city of San Pedro. And they believe that Ephraim was one of the collateral damages in this so-called drug war. And they were able to find CCTV footage showing him giving a ride to a hitchhiker who happened to be someone incarcerated previously for drug-related crimes. Unfortunately, while the family was searching for the body of Ephraim, they found it in another province, and the hitchhiker's body was found in a separate dump also. So the consequence of this, he left his family, particularly his toddler and infant sons. And to expound more on what has happened and how they have pushed through despite, I'd like to call on Shira Escudero from Rise Up.
Hello, everyone. I am Shira Escudero from Rise Up for Life and for Rights. And I just want to share that the ICC proceedings that's happening right now is like a speck of hope for me. We've been waiting for this for almost a decade, but even if we're waiting for this for almost a decade for this to come, I can totally say that we're 100% happy about what's happening because Duterte's arrest, reminds me of what really happened to my brother. It reminds me of that there's really a killing. And for me, Duterte would get arrested in the first place if these crimes against humanity did not occur. But of course, with the ICC proceedings that we hope will be fair to both Duterte and the relatives of the victims, I hope that they will be fair, and I hope for the truth to be seen through the ICC trial. And for the families of the victims, we're really grateful to the international community for standing with us, for always listening to us, trying to retell our stories, invite us in different activities where we can speak out, lay and share what really happened to us. And I also want to share that even if it almost a decade, my brother died, I prayed for us, and I cry almost every day whenever I remember my little brother. So it's really a struggle for us, but here we are still fighting, still trying to face people, still trying to retell our stories all over again. And we're really grateful for those who are not getting tired of listening to us and trying to stand with us. I also want to share how the health professionals were already there since day one. And I also want to share that I am one of the recipients of the help of CHD. And even until now, we're still trying to process all the trauma that we experience. We're still going through therapies. Volunteer health professionals were always there whenever we do children and youth camps and whenever we try to process with the mothers. I also want to share the recent attacks that's happening right now here in the Philippines against the families of the victims. So I receive hate messages both in comment sections whenever there's a post or news about the processes related to the ICC, or whenever we try to advocate. I also receive personal messages. Someone even said, drug addicts should be beheaded. And that same woman told me, are you also a drug addict? So for me, it's like she's trying to imply that I should get beheaded too, because for her, drug addicts should get beheaded. And then days ago, I saw a comment, someone saying or suggesting that I should get punched on the nose. And then the other person replied, if only she's near, she'll do that. And then someone said, they should hang themselves, us, the families of the victims, should just hang ourselves. And someone even said, patayin na yan lahat, or kill them all. Even the families of the victims, they want us dead. So it's really hard to put ourselves out here in the public, but still we try our best to stand, to become visible, to show the Filipino people and the international community that we're real, we are real people. This really happened, and killings are still happening until now. And we hate to be called just statistics or numbers, because we have faces, we have lives, we have stories to tell. And Ephraim left us his two toddlers, his sons that are still wondering why their father died. So I call to the international community to please keep on standing with us. Please join us in this journey. I know it might take decades or even more than a decade for Duterte to get convicted, but we're very willing to wait. And I hope you're still with us on the process and on the victory or whatever it is that will happen or whatever the result will be on this ICC trial. So again, I am grateful for the international community, and I call for your help to please join us in this struggle. And I don't think we'll be able to come this far without all of you people. So I'm really grateful for that. Whenever I speak to people, I actually always get emotional, but right now I want this day to be filled with positivities, hope, and light, that even if we're struggling right now, even if it's really dark on where we are right now, I hope we find light, we find hope, and I hope someday our family will feel the real meaning of healing, because I badly want to heal. I want this nightmare to be over, although I am aware that we will carry this trauma forever, but without all of your support, we won't be able to stand up and find courage as well. So thank you so much to the Filipino people and to the international community. I really appreciate you joining us in this struggle and our hope for justice and on this fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Shira. I know, like, okay, the whole organizing team is trying not to cry right now. So, despite everything, thank you for sharing. And taas ka mong pagpupugay, meaning we salute you for continuing despite the attacks, not just on your person, the threats on your the world is shifting right now, and only in international solidarity can we continue on. And to expound more on that, we have two more reactors, and I'd like to introduce the next one. She is also a member of the Coalition for People's Right to Health, and she is also a member, of course, of the People's Health Movement here in the Philippines. She graduated from the University of the Philippines, Manila, from the Integrated Liberal Arts and Medicine program in 2016. And immediately after graduating, she entered into the Doctors to the Barrios program of the Department of Health. And she served as the Municipal Health Officer of Tubajon in the small province of the Dinagat Islands for 3 years before she eventually was invited to work as the Provincial Health Officer for the Dinagat Islands from 2020 to 2022. So she was one of the strongholds for that province during the pandemic, when the protocols were still something that we had to play by ear. And after that, she proceeded to take up her master's degree in international health and tropical medicine at the University of Oxford, and she just finished this year. Actually, she graduated this year. She took it in 2024. And we are proud, actually, also to welcome back our beloved member, Dr. Jillian Frances Lee.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you guys hear me? Yes, I hope so. All right, so first of all, thank you very much to our presenters, and thank you to the families of the victims, to Shira and everyone else who worked to pursue justice for their family members who suffered under the Duterte administration's war on drugs. As Shira did say, it's incredibly difficult. If you go to any comment section on any Facebook page in the Philippines, the moment anybody mentions the war on drugs, the moment anyone mentions anything critical of the previous administration, that post will be completely flooded, filled with people supporting the former president, people who say that he was right, people who support the extrajudicial killings. And frankly, I cannot imagine going through all of that every day, especially if I know that a member of my family was, especially while dealing with the loss of a family member. So all of the victims' families involved in this case against the former president are all very brave, unspeakably brave. And really, I don't think the Filipino people in general will know to thank them, but at least we do. So yeah, and thank you also to the lawyers and the rest of the legal community who have been working with these victims, the families of these victims, to pursue justice, and to the international community for standing with us. We at the People's Health Movement Philippines also support the victims' calls for justice. And this justice is not just limited to what may be provided by the International Criminal Court. As Atty. Conti mentioned earlier, the International Criminal Court basically just goes after a lot of people in the Philippine National Police, in the national government, and local governments who are also complicit, who have also supported former President Duterte's war on drugs, and who still need to be held accountable. So we continue to call on the current administration to bring all of the perpetrators of Duterte's war on drugs to justice. I would also like to reiterate that the culture of impunity under former President Duterte's administration was not just limited to the extrajudicial killings conducted as part of the war on drugs. The war on drugs was basically the highlight kind of his campaign. It was what he ran on. He said, I will eliminate criminality by killing all of the drug addicts. And as with other instances, this was also not the culture of impunity expanded far beyond that. Aside from blaming people who use drugs for the numerous social ills of the Philippines, he also, one of the other groups of people who former President Duterte also blamed were basically those he considered communists. Red tagging was a term that evolved, came out during the term of former President Duterte. Basically means that it basically means labeling somebody as a communist or a communist rebel. And in many areas, particularly in rural areas in the Philippines, it was also used in a similar way that the label of drug user was used, or drug addict was used. It was what people said, accused other people of, and that put a spotlight on them, put a target on them. And many human rights activists, lawyers, journalists, community development workers, and health workers were killed during the administration of former President Duterte. In turn, not because they were accused of using drugs, but because they were accused of being communists or communist sympathizers. So that included Lara Alvarez, a community health worker, Mary Rose Sanselan, a doctor in the Visayas region of the Philippines, and many others. So while the case currently in the ICC is focused on the systemic killing of people accused of using drugs, there are other more people who were victimized by this culture of impunity that, again, began with attacks targeting people who were accused of using drugs, but expanded to include anyone who was basically opposed to what the former president was doing. So at the same time, as this was happening, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, you can imagine that this also led to, or rather also discouraged people from working in these areas, from opposing the conduct of the administration and in working in certain communities or in certain areas such as human rights and development for fear of the attacks coming onto them. So these effects, well, are still being felt until now. So at the same time, while the former president's war on drugs has led to the death of many, and it still continues, as Attorney Conti mentioned, to this day under a different name and maybe with less publicity involved. We still don't have any comprehensive program that actually seeks to address the use of illegal drugs and everything else that that tries to provide an environment that will discourage the use of illegal drugs, which, as we all know, should be part and parcel of healthcare. So, yeah, that so that having been said, we still have a long way to go. This is a very good first step to be taken towards obtaining justice for the victims of Duterte's drug war. But when it comes to rebuilding the damage, to developing support both for the victims and for the rest of, both for the victims of the war on drugs and for the rest of the and for the people of the Philippines. No, wait. The people who are currently still being affected by the way the war on drugs is being conducted today in the Philippines. We still have a long way to go, part and parcel of which will need the development of a comprehensive program for dealing with drug harm reduction for drug abuse, which will necessitate a public health system that is accessible and that serves the needs of the Filipino people. So, yeah, again, thank you to the PHM team for organizing this forum, and again, to the families of the victims, without whom nothing would have happened. They were absolutely necessary in bringing this case forward to the international community, to the ICC, after they failed to get justice locally. Though I hope that the investigations that are proceeding under the domestic courts continue. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Julian Lee, for your reaction. And we're starting to see some questions in the chat box. So for now, we have one more reactor before we open the floor to answer for our reactors and our speaker. So, of course, acts of solidarity, that's something that we're very familiar with in PHM. And we're from the Philippines, we're very sure that even abroad, there's so much going on with Trump, with rising tensions. And our next reactor is someone we have worked closely with, particularly us from the Council for Health and Development. They also happen to work with other countries with very, very dire situations right now, particularly the Democratic Republic of Congo and Palestine. We all know the situation of Palestine now. And she is particularly a member of Viva Salud from Belgium, which is a non-government organization that works to campaign and to bring health closer to the people with its partners. And she is a campaigner and a health activist, again, from Belgium. So I would like to give the floor to Marie-Lou Badi.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I will be very quick. So as they said, my name is Marie-Lou. I'm from Belgium, from the NGO Viva Salud, and we work particularly on with three countries and with partners in three countries. So the Philippines, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Palestine. And this statement and this reaction is mainly a statement of solidarity. So first, thank you so much to PHM, Philippines, and also to Atty. Kristina Conti for the presentation. It was like really brilliant and really a good dive into what's happening with this Duterte trial situation. And what you are doing, I think, with fighting for accountability in the Philippines in the Duterte case is very much a necessity in the fight for justice for the Filipino people. But it is also so rich and so important for all the people fighting for human rights worldwide. And that this case is very much a source of hope for everyone looking for justice, looking for accountability. And so I will draw two lessons from today. The first one would be that fighting for accountability is possible, and our experience working in Palestine and Congo with partners who are really struggling and sometimes struggling with oppressors who use and preach violence in such a level and with such a level of impunity that they sometimes can feel very hopeless. But what you are showing here is, and what the case of Duterte is also showing, is that accountability is possible, and that some form of justice is possible. Of course, as Atty. Kristina Conti said, it's not won yet, but it's already a very a step in the good direction. And of course, it will not bring back the dead people. It will not heal the wound. And of course, I will always have like a very strong admiration for the fighting and the strength and determination of the victims, which is very admirable. But some form of justice is possible, and it's very important. And what you all are doing in the Philippines is really inspiring and gives a lot of hope to many people around the world. And I can also obviously refer to people in Palestine and the people of Palestine who are really wanting to have some accountability from Netanyahu, to have some justice and have him condemned for all what he's done. And similarly in Congo, people who really want to show the situation as it is and to have justice, and who sometimes feel hopeless. And that's the first lesson. The second lesson that I will take from Attorney Kristina Conti is the importance of wording. And that's something that she explained very well in her presentation, is how dehumanization works in this kind of situation, and the vilification of the population, and of course in the Philippines, of the poor population, on this war on drugs. And this is something we can see very much also with the use of the word war, like you are facing like the war on drugs. Is it really like, or is it a war on the poor people? But this way of saying it's a war, whereas a war should be a conflict with two sides who are armed and who battle each other. And now this kind of violence in the use of the word war is very, very interesting. For example, we have now our partners in Congo are facing a war on Kivu, on the region of North Kivu, whereas it's obviously very much raiding and massacre of the population for the control of natural resources. And the framing matters so much. And for example, obviously like the war on Gaza is very much a genocide. So it's not a symmetrical conflict. It's very much asymmetrical and not a war. So that's the two lessons I take from the presentation of Attorney Kristina Conti, and also thank you very much to the presentation or the testimony of the family of the victims. And as Dylan said, we salute you. We might be very far away. Personally, I'm Belgium, and I know people from all over the world participate today, but we see you and we hear you and we support you. That's the first and the main message we want to say today. And then maybe two very quick opening themes. I think it was very interesting to see in the last testimony of Gillian, the subject of targeting of health workers, which is something we observe in many countries, and it also happens in Palestine, and it's very coming back and back. And Gillian, she mentioned the red tagging, and of course we have many examples. For example, the case of Zaha Alvarez, who's also who was a nurse and also a victim of this kind of behavior. Of course, as PHM and as health activists, we pay a lot of attention on this targeting of health workers, and that's something we can see in many situations, and that we care very much about. The second opening theme would be imperialism, because many times these violent regimes are operating without any reaction of the Western countries. And in the case of Duterte, it was even with a strong support from Trump. And I think that's very important to interrogate which interests are being defended by this regime, and why are the Western countries not saying anything or permitting or even supporting these violent regimes and all this violence to happen. And that's also a very common point with the violences going on in the Congo right now, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who benefits from this so-called war on Kivu, and who will get the resources. And obviously with Palestine, it's also the same subject: who benefits, and why no one is why is not Netanyahu in jail right now? So that was the second opening theme, so imperialism. But mainly, thank you so much, and we see you, we hear you, and we express full solidarity with your struggle, and we will try to be all along the way of this process with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marilu. So we can now open the floor for our questions and reactions. So we can start probably with the first batch from Roman Vega. So again, thank you for those of PHM Global who are here, and also for the staunch support you have been giving, especially to us from countries who really need extra help in helping amplify our voices in the international stage. So Roman had asked about how health workers like us were affected during this war on drugs. So first off, I would like also to answer this question. There was this culture of impunity that became very rampant. As mentioned by those who went first, they talked about how a lot of these killings dehumanize a lot of our fellow human beings. So a drug addict isn't a person, he's a drug addict. So the same also went for activists. An activist is a rebel, they are not a person. And even with health workers, especially during the pandemic, when a lot of health workers took to the streets in order to bring light to how the conditions were still very bad, especially with poor support to those who had left their families because they died during the pandemic. Their benefits weren't given. And instead of praising these health workers for going out into the streets, attending dialogues with the Department of Health, some of those, especially from partner organizations like the Alliance of Health Workers or Health Alliance for Democracy, even when they bring these issues into light, into the public, they get vilified, they get red tagged. Some of the hospital union workers would be followed to their homes, harassed even, rather than help these health workers bring their voices closer to those in power in order to find solutions. So that's one thing that happened. And also how, going back to the case of Dr. Mary Rose Sansalan, who at that time was the head of the response team for the COVID response team in her area in Negros, and also Zara Alvarez, who besides being a human rights worker was also a community health worker who had to go back and forth to inland communities, to isolated communities within Negros Island. They were also part of those who were systematically tagged, pursued, and after the black propaganda and red tagging, were eventually also killed, both also by riding in tandem. And they are among the people that PHM had helped us bring closer to the awareness of the greater international community. So would anyone else like to also add?
Amy, can I add?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you look at the war on drugs of Duterte, it started initially as a war on drugs, but he really used it to also attack those who are critical of him. So it may not be directly related to the war on drugs in the sense that health workers were addicts or health workers were part of this drug addiction thing that Duterte said he wanted to eradicate. But it was also an issue of how he pushed it to show his dominance. And regardless of human rights violations, he was the one who said, kill, kill, kill. He was telling the police, just go ahead and kill, I have your backs. And then he shifted from the drug addicts to include also the activists And he came out with an anti-terror law that was also signed during his term. And then he also closed down some communication outlets. So he also cut down on the right to information. So he just pushed his way around, seemingly showing that he was in control, he was in power. So this is what we were very much against, because he no longer respected human rights. And because of the culture of impunity, as Jamie was saying, all the policemen, they thought they had the license to kill. So we had doctors who were killed, we had health workers who were killed, not because of the drug addicts, but because they were part of the culture of impunity. And if you go against Duterte, then you will be part also of those who will be killed. And if you look also at the drug war situation, who were the drug pushers? Who were the drug lords? These were big people, including the family of former President Duterte. But he wasn't addressing this. He was addressing those who he called drug addicts, who were mostly from the poor. But it wasn't even that clear who among these are drug addicts. But if you again look at the statistics, these are poor people who were just trying to let ends meet by working. And then if you go against him, then he will tag you as a drug addict. So it was a very bad situation where human rights was really not respected. So how do we raise this to the global level? We appreciate the solidarity that our colleagues have shown, have given us, and even in this fight in the ICC, we have a lot of support from our international colleagues. And this webinar will also help disseminate what is really happening. And we hope you will continue to support us in the same manner that we also support the struggles of our colleagues in other countries. So the situation is not limited to the Philippines. And as Marilu said, this is also related to imperialism, on how you use power to thwart the will of the people. But the people, once organized, will prevail. Okay, I think Tracy has her hand up.
Yeah. So thank you, po. So I'm going to take a different perspective, or a different, with a different lens. So I do understand that health workers, and that's correct, have been targeted also in the general war against dissent. But in the war on drugs specifically, we've seen a pattern where, in the same way that lawyers have been used to make the war on drugs legitimate, health workers have also been used. And we've seen doctors in cahoots with police faking the death certificates, or misdeclaring the death, the cause of death in these certificates. It's because in the Philippines, or I guess also in other countries, if the cause of death is unnatural causes, you need a police report. To get the police report, you need to be on the good side of the policeman. And of course, that doesn't happen all the time, especially if you think the police are the perpetrators. And so we've seen doctors certify that the death is due to bronchopneumonia, but there are bullet wounds on and this is unfortunate in one of the cases, bullet wounds, I think in the head, in the skull of a 9-year-old boy. And so it's sad that generally the health professionals could be used to legitimize the system. And also another point, the health healthcare system in general and health workers have not been utilized as part of the war on drugs policy. And so you very rarely hear health professionals chiming in that, oh, during the war on drugs, this is what we did. The drug problem is a health problem, public health problem, most primarily. Although in the Philippines, we do say that it's largely socioeconomic. If you look at other countries, I would agree that generally that the war on drugs would have a real public health implication. For example, in some countries, there are countries that have set up like the safe could check drug users, or what we know would be drug users, use drugs so that they can stay awake for work. These are the ones who drive long haul trucks, those who work the night shift, and so forth. So the socioeconomic conditions underlying must be addressed. In terms of rehabilitation, we have rarely seen health workers speak up because there is no drug rehabilitation or no good drug rehabilitation program in the Philippines. And this is interesting. I know we're a largely Catholic Christian country. Drug rehabilitation seems to be led by the church, or now it's largely led by the church. And you see all these priests, lead these, professed drug addicts, lead them through faith-based rehabilitation, which strikes me as not scientific. Although in some cases they work, but I don't think that's the best that we can do. So hopefully we should see a lot of health workers speak up. And there's someone who has messaged about ER workers who could testify to the brutality of the wounded bodies and dead on arrivals at the hospitals. They could actually serve as witnesses in the trial in the ICC. However, that's out of our hands. That would be up for the office of the prosecutor to determine if and when or how many health workers could be called to the stand. Hopefully, he calls at least one, because clearly there have been there are a lot of people out there who could speak about the war on drugs, especially of course there's Filipinos, no? I'm sure you've heard about the East Avenue Medical Center, which is like one of the hotspots where these dead are brought. And actually in one of the reports, Doc Delen has her hand up, but in one of the reports of Reuters, they talk about hospitals where these dead bodies are brought. And some of the doctors have been quoted saying like, well, these are dead persons brought to our hospitals. What can we do for them? And so they kind of are made to justify or kind of cover up. And so, yeah, in one of the reports, Dead on Arrival by Reuters, if you look for it, they quote a hospital doctor, a government hospital doctor, who talks about like a certain resignation, like, what can we do? We just have to certify them as dead. So yeah, over to you, Jamie. Or
Yeah. So Ma'am Dalen first, and then Doc Jill.
Yeah. As mentioned by Attorney Chrissy, the cause of death of many of these victims of the drug war were all like pneumonia or heart attack, etc. When it's very clear they were trauma. And we're happy that we have a forensics pathologist who stood firm, who did the autopsies. And she said clearly, it is not medical. It was trauma, gunshot wounds, close range. And we hope that she will continue to be standing. She has been standing in support of the victims and she will continue to do that. So we salute also Dr. Raquel Fortun.
Before I give the floor to Dr. Jillian, I'd like to add regarding Dr. Fortun, because our medical school batch was very fortunate to have her as a lecturer, and she would rant about the lack of proper forensics training in the Philippines, as she had to go out as a pathologist in order to train. And especially the police system, they prefer not to fix their forensic system, so that these systematic killings, the lapses in protocol would not be recorded. Because if the forensic system in the Philippines is fixed and more forensic pathologists would be practicing, a lot would be uncovered. And out in the field, she would also call out how there are too many malpractices, and the doctors, actually those they hire to be forensic doctors, aren't even pathologically trained, or are not trained under the field of pathology and forensics. So they're not really forensic doctors. So yes, I'll give the floor to Dr. Jillian.
Yeah, hi. I don't want to take too long, but I just kind of also want to give everyone kind of like an overview of how the drug war worked in the rural areas, because a lot of it, the fact that we don't have an actual community-based drug rehabilitation, a lot of the fact that the people who are primarily tasked to manage, to address the concerns of people who use drugs are church leaders, local community leaders, and not the health workers. It's largely owing to the fact that there are no resources by and large available to deal with it. Like, for instance, well, everybody else, not everybody else, but a lot of people, like a lot of my medical school colleagues were in urban areas, in hospitals during the peak of the drug war, seeing dead bodies brought into their emergency rooms. I was in Dinagat, so town of 8,000 people. One day the police in our area just go up to me and give me a folder of like 200 people, and they're like, "Doc, these are the people who use drugs in the municipality of Tubahon. You have to screen all of them and tell us what their kind of like level of risk of relapse, risk of using drugs again. Like assign one to each of these people, recommend who needs to be admitted for drug rehabilitation, and let us know if any of them seem to be like a danger to the rest of the town." So I had this folder of 200 people, and the person who had to see to all of their needs, all of their medical concerns, just me. And that was for a small town. We were a mining town. Again, similar to what said, a lot of people who use drugs while I was working as a municipal health officer, they were people working with our local mining communities, drivers, day laborers who used methamphetamine to stay awake for work, not recreationally or anything. And if you want to solve that problem, you are not going to solve that problem solely medically. You are going to solve that problem by having regulations on like their occupational hours. You need regulations on their occupational health and safety, and none of the resources the ability to do that was available to me at the time. And if any of them needed further counseling, further rehabilitation, more than what can be provided by a general practitioner, if anyone needed to be admitted for any reason for rehabilitation, the nearest rehabilitation center was like in Davao. Yeah, in Davao, you'd have to like take a boat for 4 hours and ride on a bus for like 12 hours to get to wherever that rehabilitation center is. Basically, we don't have a working system. Like our public health system is grossly under-resourced and underfunded. And as it stood back then and as it still stands now, it's not really equipped to be able to address all of these concerns that affect people who use drugs. So this all ties back to the need for strengthening our public health system, for ensuring adequate government funding, development of health human resources to the public health system, to communities, not to be able to address these concerns on the ground. So, yeah.
All right. So this has been a very productive discussion, and as much as we'd like to continue it, we're running out of time. But before we completely run out of time, we'd like to thank everyone who came today, and we would like to give the floor to one more person. So the main coordinator for the PHM War and Conflict TC, who is also from PHM Nicaragua and the International People's Health Council, and someone who also used to be from here, from the Philippines, or came also to the Philippines, and has been one of our staunch allies. We'd like to give the floor to Maria Zuniga.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank all of you. In 1980, a group of people from Mesoamerica, from Central America, went to the Philippines. Since 1980, this region has felt strong solidarity with our comrades in the Philippines. We have a similar history in many, many ways, and to hear the stories, to hear the testimony about the criminality of Duarte, and to hear the victims' families, to hear Jillian and her wise consejos, her wise suggestions about having a better health system, and also the sharing that Mary Lou did. All of this has been really impressive, really moving. Such courageous people. What I wanted to say goes back to the idea of crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity. The problem is that the people who commit these crimes don't view the people as humans. They dehumanize people. They call them animals. We hear that daily in the case of Israel and Palestine. If we don't recognize the humanity of all of us in this world, we're not going to really be able to make changes that the People's Health Movement believes in. So I think the important thing for us here is to recognize the need for solidarity at home in each of your communities, but solidarity also across the world. I wanted to say something also about the whole idea of the use of drugs. We talk about illegal drugs, and yet every single day, the greatest pushers of drugs in the world are the pharmaceutical companies who create dependency on the drugs. And are they made responsibility for their crimes, for all the deaths that they incur in their propaganda to promote their products. So we have to work on that level as well. We have to work on making people recognize that the whole issue of drugs is all tied up in international commerce and a few people getting rich. A few people getting rich, and then not being made responsible or accountable for the deaths that they cause because of the use of supposedly legal drugs. I don't want to go any further. I just want to say that in our thematic group, we will continue to follow this ICC case. And we will try to work with our different country circles in the People's Health Movement and throughout the movement to help people become aware. It's a good thing that this was recorded so that we can share it with people all over the world who weren't able to participate today. So just know that we're with you. We are one people, we are one world, and we'll work together in solidarity as long as we live. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you again on behalf of the PHM-Philippines and the PHM Warrant Conflict TC. Thank you for attending our forum. And we hope that your questions regarding the situation in the Philippines and the implications of this ICC case, not just for our country, but for everyone who wants to file an ICC case, we hope that this would signal a change in the wind, and that especially as Shira has said, that this brings us more hope to continue the fight because it has only begun. And on behalf of the PHM-Philippines team, if you would like to contact us for other concerns, I believe one of our colleagues has posted it in the chat. And again, we hope that everyone would have a good evening, good morning. If you haven't eaten dinner yet, like me, or breakfast yet, especially for those on the other side of the globe, please don't forget to eat.